Hey, this is X-Cult Baby, and I am so sorry. It has been a month since I last posted a video. I've been in a bit of a creative slump lately, and on top of that, I was sick for like half of the month of November, so it's taken me a little while to get back on track. But anyways, I figured after taking such a long hiatus, I should jump back into it with a good old atheist Bible reading, since, those are the videos that I get the most positive feedback on, and people seem to ask for those the most. Today's atheist Bible reading will be about a guy named Joseph, but for our story, we'll call him Joey. So, Joey is the son of Jake and the brother of Dinah. And if you haven't seen the video on Dinah, you definitely should. Link is in the description. So Joey is the son of Jake and Rachel, and since Rachel is Jake's favorite wife, by extension, Joey is his favorite son of the 11 sons that he has between his wife Rachel, his wife Leah, and a couple of concubines. Definitely check out the story about Leah and Rachel too. Link in the description. Yeah, one woman and one man, my ass, Christians. Just saying. So Joey, being, the youngest sibling, is a huge fucking snitch. And he rats on his brothers for goofing off while they're supposed to be working, tending their father's flocks. And on top of that, Joey's brothers already can't fucking stand him because Jake does not try to hide the fact that Joey is his favorite son at all. He even gets him a special coat. Then a little later, Joey has a dream that heavily implies that all of his brothers are bowing down to him. And the little shit has the nerve to tell his brothers about it, which naturally only makes them hate him more. So, later on, Jake sends Joey to go spy on his brothers again, because, everybody knows there's nothing a youngest sibling loves more than to tattle on their older siblings. So, as Joey is approaching his brothers, they see him coming, and they are immediately plotting to kill him. And the oldest brother is like, okay, relax, you guys. We can't kill him. Let's just throw him in a big hole in the ground and then decide what to do with him. So as soon as Joey gets to them, they take him and they throw him in a hole, and then they sit down and have some lunch. And while they're sitting and eating, they see some merchants passing by, and they decide, hey, let's sell Joey as a slave to get rid of him instead of killing him. So they do that, and then they rip up his coat and dip it in goat's blood to make it seem like he was torn apart by a wild animal, and they take this back to their father. So, pausing the story for a second, this story has often been used to highlight how God has a plan for us, and we may not understand it, but he always comes through in the end. In my opinion, any plan that explicitly involves suffering of innocent people is a bad plan, especially when the person making the plan is an all-knowing, all-powerful being. But we will get back to that point later. Now, the Bible goes off on a completely unrelated tangent about one of Joey's brothers, Judah, the oldest, and his own family problems. God doesn't like one of Judah's sons, so he kills him, and then one of Judah's other sons is supposed to have sex with the dead son's wife, because the dead son didn't have any kids with her, so he's supposed to fuck his sister-in-law and make babies with her to carry on his brother's name. But he doesn't want to have kids with her, so he pulls out at the last second, and then God doesn't like that, so he kills him too. So then Judah tells her to be a widow until his third son grows up so that he can have sex with her and impregnate her. And then Judah's wife dies, and Judah goes, to see his daughter-in-law, who's a widow, and then mistakes her for a prostitute and fucks her. But then he hears that his daughter-in-law has been prostituting herself, and then he's like, oh, that bitch needs to die. And then she's like, well, you're the one that paid me to fuck you. So then he doesn't kill her, and she gives birth to her father-in-law's twins. The end, I guess. I don't even need to mention how fucked up it is that God killed one dude for no apparent reason and killed another dude for pulling out. And how even more fucked up on top of that it is that Judah pays a prostitute to have sex with him, and then when he finds out his daughter is a prostitute, he wants her burned at the stake and shit. I mean, it's all very wild. But anyways, back to Joey. So Joey is taken to Egypt and sold as a slave to a guy named Potiphar. And Potiphar is the chief of Pharaoh's army. And it says here that God was with Joey and he made everything that he did successful, and Potiphar put him in charge of his whole house. You'd think he could have used God's help a little earlier, when he was being sold into slavery, but whatever. It also says that he blessed Potiphar because of Joey, and in my opinion, no matter how nice a slave master is, I don't think God should be doing that guy any favors. So Joey grows into a handsome young man, and Potiphar's wife notices and tries to get him to fuck her. And every time Joey's like, no way. But she keeps asking him every single day. And then one day when nobody's around, she actually grabs him and tries to force him to fuck her. So he just leaves his, clothes in her hand and runs away. And then she calls the guards and accuses him of trying to rape her, even though it was kind of the other way around. So, of course, Potiphar believes his own wife over his slave, and Joey gets thrown into prison. But then, since God is still supposedly with him, Joey ends up getting put in charge of all the prisoners. Again, if God is with Joey, where was he when he was getting falsely accused of rape and getting thrown in prison in the first place? So the chief cupbearer and the chief baker of Pharaoh are thrown into prison also, and they have some weird dreams. And Joey explains the meaning of their dreams. He tells the cupbearer that his dream means that he will be back to his job in 3 days, but for the baker, it means that he's going to be beheaded in 3 days. And then 3 days later, things unfold exactly the way that he said that they would. So, a couple of years later, Pharaoh is having some really weird dreams, and he's convinced that these dreams have to have some kind of special meaning, but nobody can figure it out. And then the cupbearer is like, oh yeah, there was this guy in prison who interpreted my dreams, and he was totally accurate. You should probably get that guy. Probably should have remembered him a couple of years ago, but oh well. So Joey is called in to meet Pharaoh, and he tells him that the dream means that God has decided there will be 7 years of bountiful harvest in Egypt, followed immediately by 7 years of severe famine. He also tells Pharaoh that he has to appoint somebody over the land to collect and store up the food during the bountiful years so that they won't all starve during the famine. Then Pharaoh appoints Joey to the position. So now he's gone from rags to riches, slave to prisoner to second most powerful man in Egypt. Then Joey gets a wife and 2 sons, and he does the work Pharaoh put him in charge of, storing up the food. And then when the famine starts, apparently, the famine affects the entire earth, and Joey is put in charge of distributing the food. It's kind of weird how there's, no historical records of a worldwide 7-year famine, but, So Joey's family back in Canaan is also being affected by the famine, and they hear how there's food in Egypt. So Jake has 10 of his remaining 11 sons go and get some food from Egypt. The son that stays behind is little Benny, who is Joey's only full-blood brother and the youngest of them. Since he's Jake's new favorite son, since he thinks that Joey is dead, he wants to make sure nothing happens to little Benny like, what he's been led to believe happened to Joey. So the 10 brothers go to Egypt to buy grain, and Joey recognizes them all immediately, but none of them recognize him, which, makes sense considering that the last time they saw him, he was probably a teenager. Naturally, he jumps on this opportunity for a little revenge. He's all like, okay, who the fuck are you guys, and where the fuck are you from? And they're like, oh, we're just some brothers from Canaan here to buy food for our starving family. And Joey's like, yeah, get a load of these guys. Boo-hoo-hoo, we're just 10 brothers here to buy food. Yeah, I see right through your bullshit. You're here to spy on us. And they're like, no, seriously, we're all brothers. Actually, there's 12 of us, but the youngest one stayed home and the other one is dead. I don't know why they brought up the brother that they think is dead, because it makes no sense. But it does make for an interesting plot device for them to acknowledge the dead brother who is actually standing in front of them. So, just a little note about how this makes more sense from a storytelling standpoint than it does from a something that somebody would actually do standpoint. So Joey's like, alright, I'm gonna keep one of you here in prison, and then when the rest of you can come back with this supposed 11th brother of yours, then I'll believe you. Again, if they are spies and they're not in fact brothers, couldn't they just pay some other random dude to pretend to be their brother? This doesn't really make sense. So, after locking all of them up for 3 days, just for funsies, he sends them all home with grain and the money that they brought to pay for the grain. So, how nice of him to lock them up and keep one of them locked up, but then, not make them pay for dinner. Of course, now they all feel terrible because they think that they're being punished either, by karma or by God. It's unclear who they think they're being punished by, but they think that they're being punished for all those years ago selling Joey into slavery, which technically they are. So when they get home, they tell Jake everything that happened and try to convince him to let them take little Benny back to Egypt with them so they can get their brother free of prison. Again, doesn't even try to conceal his favoritism because he refuses. Because he's worried something will happen to Benny, even though something has already happened to one of his other sons. I mean, like, come on. Doesn't give a fuck about that son in jail at all. But eventually they run out of food again, so Jake really has no choice but to let Benny go back to Egypt with them. He also sends them with some gifts to try to appease this very angry guy who is apparently in charge of the food. So when they get there, Joey finds out that they brought little Benny, and he calls for a feast to be prepared. In the meantime, the brothers are all freaking out because they think that this Egyptian guy is clearly out to get them. But then their brother is released from prison, and all 11 of them are back together again. So as soon as Joey sees Benny, he has to excuse himself for a second and have a little cry and, slap himself in the mirror and get his shit together. And then, once he's back together, they all sit down and have a meal and everything seems to be fine. The brothers get their food, and again, Joey sends them back with the money they were going to pay for the food with. He doesn't charge them for it. But this time, as well as putting the money back in their bags, he has his special silver cup secretly placed in Benny's grain bag. So, not long after they leave the city, Joey sends guards after them and accuses them of stealing his cup. And they all swear up and down that none of them are thieves, and they all invite the guards to search their bags, because they're pretty sure they're innocent. They have nothing to hide. But when they find the cup in Benny's bag, they haul his ass right back to Egypt. And Joey's like, wow, I took you assholes into my home and fed you, and you repay me by stealing? Fuck that. Now this kid is gonna be my slave. And the oldest brother is like, you know what? You're absolutely right to be mad, but if we go back home without Benny, my father will literally die of grief. So take me as your slave instead. Let the boy go. And so now that his brothers have passed this little test of Joey's, he sends all his servants out of the room, so the 12 of them are all alone. And, because he's a huge sap, he starts bawling and reveals that he's their long-lost brother who they sold into slavery. And he's like, hey, don't be mad at yourselves for what you did all these years ago, selling me into slavery and everything, because this was actually all God's plan. I am here making sure that we all have food and that Egypt has food, and it's just because of me. So, this all worked out. So the brothers go back to Canaan, and Jake and his whole family move to Egypt, and they live with Joey, and it's all happily ever after the end. It is my opinion that there is not a single person in this story who shouldn't be incredibly pissed off at God. Everybody in this story really had to go through some serious bullshit for no fucking reason. The entire earth, or at least the areas between Egypt and Canaan, presumably, because the people who wrote this story had no idea how big the earth actually was, suffered a 7-year famine because God just fucking decides there's gonna be a famine, I guess. There's gonna be one. And then he comes up with this convoluted bullshit to save everyone from the famine he caused by putting one of his most faithful and loyal servants, who at the beginning of the story, probably a child, he puts him through kidnapping, slavery, attempted rape by Potiphar's wife, and years of imprisonment. Even if, for some reason, God just had to make this famine happen, just had to, he definitely could have saved everyone much more easily than he did. He could have told Pharaoh directly what was going to happen and let him take care of it, instead of involving Joey. He could have made Joey a renowned dream interpreter without him having to go to prison, so that Pharaoh would still end up giving him the job of second in command. I mean, why did God choose instead to capitalize on Joey's brother's absolute hatred for him as a means of salvation? If God can and does use other people's hatred for his own ends, that means sometimes, at least sometimes, hating a person so much that you want to kill them is a good thing, at least according to this story. Well, that's it for this video. I am XCultBaby, reminding you to go free yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like, leave a comment letting me know what you think, subscribe and ring the bell to see more from me in the future, and share this video with anyone who might enjoy it. Social media links and my email address are in the description if you want to contact me or follow me on any other platforms. An extra special thanks to all of my patrons. I really appreciate your generosity and support.